It is important to note that nothing yet is final on the Sandbox server. However, it shows in what direction Wargaming wants to go, hence why I took the time now to make this 3-chapter proposal or 3-chapter video to explain my personal problems with the sandbox, what is good, what is bad, and how I would change it. It is also important to note that so far we do not know yet what is going to happen to artillery. We do not know yet what is going to happen to tanks with HESH or HEP rounds. For example, like Leopard 1, the whole British tank line, and other selected vehicles. So, before we start talking about the problem, I want to point out and tell you who I am shortly. I am a Swiss YouTuber and a player. I play since 2011. I play this game quite a lot. I have 44,000 games in it. I am in the upper percentage of player base. I have a 61% overall win rate. I usually play around 3,000 to 3,300 WN8 and have an overall WN8 of 2,770. I have several tier 10 tanks with third marks, and I'm almost played all Clan Wars campaigns, which led to me to have every single tier 10 tank in the game except for the T22 medium. Yes, 279 Chieftain is all in my possession. So this is why I think I personally can point out what the issues are in high tier gameplay and how we could tackle them. Why do we have a problem with premium round spam? Again, this is very subjective, but for me personally it is that until today, the more and more tanks which got released, and I'm talking now about the SCOG, the Type 5 Heavy, the 430U, the Chieftain, and even to some extent the Mouse. All tanks now are here which they simply don't have any weak spots, at least on their turret. So you just have to drive into a position where you can hide your lower plate and boom, finished. That's it. You are now in a position where you are basically impenetrable. This especially counts towards the SCOG and now the Chieftain. The Chieftain being even more ridiculous because it actually has a turret which is basically incredible hard to penetrate even with premium rounds. You have to hit this cupola. The same goes for the 279. The 279 has even a hole which is brain dead basically. It's as long as you are on a slight incline, enemies have barely a chance to penetrate. 430U has a cupola which has an effective 330mm of armor and another cupola which has 280 to 300mm of effective armor. Those are not weak spots. Those are just armor parts which you have to shoot premium rounds at it. And this is why premium rounds were started to be used not for when you have issues, but because you have to use them so you have a chance against those people or against those tanks. And to that comes that gold ammunition, in my opinion, has rarely a weakness. Sure, APCR can lose more penetration over distance and has a slightly worse normalization, but it's marginal. Heat, for example, is not really is only really affected by spaced armor, and the only real spaced armor which is actually affecting it, in my opinion, is the one on the E100 side and the Type 5 Heavy side skirts and Mouse side skirts. But that's it. For example, a tank which has heat screens like the Stritzwagen 103, they are basically useless because heat is actually the main counterpart or the main counter towards the Stritzwagen tanks. You load heat rounds and you shoot into the lower plate and you penetrate without any issues. And this counts for tank like the RU, which has 280 or even 250mm of heat round penetration. So the antidote against the heat rounds is most of the time just too weak. And this is another big problem. What is HE ammunition for me? Because this is also important because in the third iteration we now have a new HE. So HE ammunition, in my point of view, is a high risk, high reward ammunition type. It has very bad penetration, it deals significantly less damage when it doesn't penetrate. But if I'm able to sneak up at the rears of, for example, a Super Conqueror or a having a paper TD in front of me, an artillery piece, I now get the chance to penetrate them for a lot more damage. Usually, or so far, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 22 to 25% more damage when you penetrate with a HE round. But obviously this doesn't as with every single tank in the game. For example, the Sandlag has much more HE damage than normal rounds, which makes the HE ridiculously strong on it. But in general, it is that you get a 22% DPM buff for HE, and it is high risk, high reward. This is what I like about HE, because it allows me to think ahead and think on what to do. Like, I know I get the rears of a Super Conqueror. He doesn't see me. I'm loading this HE round, trying to penetrate it, which I most certainly will because it's only 38mm thick. I will wreck modules and probably even make him burn. And this is because I was smart enough to drive around him, he didn't notice me, and it was smart of me to start using the free key to use HE as the most best culprit. Yes, also HE is kind of toxic in the sense of, well, you control with it. You can play HE4, you can play Forge 1 E1, Forge 155, and you can even play the E100 for HE alone only, which there is in the German community a very known player about that, which is, well, not really that good, but he just still does it anyway because in his head HE always does damage. But if you only shoot HE, most of the time you have a disadvantage in the current system. However, I do see that when you shoot HE only, it can be frustrating as at the one if you receive it, because you basically have no counterplay. But to that I'm coming to in just a bit when we talk about what I would personally change. Because now, what has changed on the Sandbox server? So this is where I just want to briefly sum up everything which was changed on the Sandbox server. The idea behind the Sandbox server's test is that we want to have a complete ammunition rework, meaning that every single ammunition type will be changed, or the ammunition classes, standard, special or premium rounds, and HE and HESH will be changed. So we have now most likely four different ammunition types. But it is important to note that those ammunition types aren't AP, APCR, and heat, but they're just standard, special, HE, and HESH rounds. Part from that Sandbox rework is that standard ammunition should become more attractive to use for everybody. So it has more sense to shoot them as you do more damage. For that, we also have now more alpha damage on standard rounds, and we also have more HPs on all tiers, where lower tiers have more and much more HP, while higher tiers only got a marginal buff. We are talking about almost 300% more HP on tier 1s and up to, I think, 100% more HP to tier 5. And we talk about 20% more HP on higher tiers, or 22% in the case of the E100, and an increase of AP round or standard round damage for higher tier tanks of around 22 to 24%. Again, here the E100 has an increase of 24% damage. Now we have the fact that if we increase the HPs by around 22% and increase the standard round damage of around 24% or 22% as well, depends, again, it really fluctuates, you will notice that if we just do this and keep standard rounds at where they are, premium rounds at where they are, we will have a decrease of 22% in the effectiveness of premium rounds, because everything is getting strong by 22%, so this makes the heat rounds just 22% worse. And this is a weird topic, or not a weird topic, it's a weird way to solve this issue in my opinion. But again, effectively it makes premium rounds 22% less effective. Now, with the third iteration, we got a new HE system, and if we really quickly just dense it all together and run it down, it is that HE cannot pen anymore. Again, artillery HE and hash rounds are excluded from this test. HE is supposed to do now always do damage if you hit the armor. I tried this, I tested this, and well, yes, it always does damage, but just doing 1 damage is really not that cool in my opinion. And it also got its alpha nerfed. So for example, the FV used to have 1750 alpha with HE, now it is 480. The E100, which had around 950 HE damage, now deals 320. So on average, you could say that maybe the HE alpha was nerfed by around a third. Or excuse me, not a third, by 300%. Just divided by 3. I'm stupid with percentages. And this is a lot. Especially as HE cannot pen anymore, you can't really use it as a high risk, high reward ammunition type. And lastly, the algorithm was changed on how module damage or how the spall, in general the spall and the shrapnels interact with the tank, making it more convenient to use and more logical to use. So for example, if you hit the cupola of a tank, you're not going to burn this tank because somehow a shrapnel hit the engine deck, penetrated and made the engine go broke. So this is what we have right now. So now let's move on to the second chapter.